Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing a video about what's on my TBR pile. There's a lot of books I get sent, I buy a lot of books, but I don't read nearly as fast as I would like to. So therefore they stack up. So this is a list of the books that are currently to be read. Hopefully there'll be some ones you haven't heard of that you might want to try. So let's start with some from my publisher, who are Angry Robot Books. There's Swashbucklers by Dan Hanks. There's Stringers by Chris Panettiere. And there's The Second Bell by Gabriella Houston. Moving on, there's Among Thieves by MJ Kuhn. Heard great things about this heist book. Really looking forward to reading this soon. There's Priest of Crowns by Peter McLean. This is the fourth and final book in the War for the Rose Throne series, so I'm looking forward to reading this book and wrapping up the series. I'm a big fan of The Expanse TV show and also the books, and on my pile currently is Book 6, Babylon's Ashes, and Book 7, Persepolis Rising. I'm a big fan of John Gwynne, and so I'm rereading these books to get back up to where I was before. So there's Valor, Book 2 in The Fateful and the Fallen, Ruin, Book 3, and Wrath, Book 4, which I haven't read before, so I need to read the other ones again, get this, and then finish the series. As I mentioned, I'm a fan of The Expanse books and the TV series, but I also want to now go back and read some fantasy by Daniel Abraham. So I picked up the first book in the series, The Dragon's Path. This is the first book in the Dagger and the Coin series. I'm a big fan of Robin Hobb, so I'm reading my way through her books slowly. So I've got Dragon Keeper, Book 1 of the Rainwild Chronicles, and Dragonhaven, Book 2 in the trilogy. I'm a big fan of Anthony Ryan, and I'm currently reading The Pariah, but I now need to go back and finish one of his previous series which I've started, which is the Draconis Memoria trilogy. So I have the second book to read, The Legion of Flame, and also Book 3, The Empire of Ashes. The next few are authors that are new to me that I've either come across myself or have been recommended to me. So the first one is by T.L. Hutchew, apologies if I mispronounced the name. And the book is The Library of the Dead. I believe this is sort of an urban fantasy set around Edinburgh and Scotland. I hear the name Stephen Graham Jones floating around the internet a lot, so I picked up one of his books to read, and this is The Only Good Indians. Lavi Tidar is a very famous and very prolific author who does all sorts of incredible work, and I have read a couple of his books this year, including the first one, By Force Alone, which is sort of a quartet of stories retelling stories about characters from history, and By Force Alone focused on King Arthur. The next one, The Hood, is about Robin Hood, and there's two more coming. But I also have this one to read soon, which is called The Escapement. Glenn Cook has been writing novels for a long time, and just for one reason or another, it's a gap in my reading history. So I'm trying to fill that gap, and I've picked up this collection, which is 3 novels about the Black Company. So I'm looking forward to reading at least one of them, if not all 3 of these, if I enjoy them very soon. As I mentioned in a previous video, Ryan Carhill I've spoken to online for quite a while. We recently met at FantasyCon in September when he came across the UK, and I thought, well, alright, I'll pick up one of his books. So I picked up Of Blood and Fire, which he's very kindly autographed for me with a personalised message. It's only slightly offensive, so that was nice. Ed MacDonald is a great author. I really enjoyed his first trilogy, The Raven's Mark. The first book in his new series has come out, Daughter of Red Winter, which I've picked up, and I'll be reading that soon in the next few months. Moving on to a bit of sci-fi. I've known Adrian Tchaikovsky for a number of years, and I'm a big fan of his work. I loved his Shadows of the App series, which was 10 books. He's since gone on to win the Arthur C. Clarke Award, and he's done a number of other sci-fi series, and I thought I should try and pick up some of the newer books. So this first one, Shards of Earth, is the first book in a series, a new sci-fi series. Jeremy Zahl is a friend who I chat to online, and I've had his book on my shelves to read for ages, and I keep saying I'll get around to it, but I haven't, so I'm going to try and read it next year. Sorry, Jeremy. And the first book is Stormblood, and of course the second book, Blind Space, has now come out. Joe Haldeman is a very famous sci-fi author who's been writing for decades, and I picked up this collection that has 3 books in one about the Forever War. It's a very famous series that I probably should have read, but I just haven't got around to yet. How many Pulitzer Prize winning novels have you read? Me? Not many. This is one that I like the sound of. Everyone talks about it. It's very, very famous. I just haven't read it. I really think I should, just for my own benefit, because I kind of think it's something I'd actually enjoy. I'm not always going to like every award-winning novel, but this one, Lonesome Dove, by Larry McMurtry, sounds exactly like my kind of thing. A really interesting Western, so it's a bit of a beast, but I'm going to try and tackle it next year. R.J. Barker is a British fantasy author. His first series, the Wounded Kingdom trilogy, has already come out, and he's just wrapped up his second trilogy, the Tide Child trilogy. I've read the first book, and now I have the second book to read, which is Call of the Bone Ships. This one is a world where all of the ships in the world are made from the bones of dead dragons, and there are no more dragons in the world anyway. And then in the first book, it's not a spoiler, the back of the book says basically they spot something in the sea that suggests there is another dragon. There is one more, and the hunt begins to go after it. And it's set upon a ship made from bone, so obviously there's differences to a normal ship, and there's lots of other things going on, and the way they navigate is really interesting. He always has really interesting ideas and twists and things that you have not seen before. So I'm going to try and read book 2 and hopefully book 3 and wrap up the second trilogy next year. Moving on to a debut novel. This is The Final Strife by Sarah L. Arifi. I've known Sarah for about a year. She has the same agent as me. I picked up that book and asked her to sign it, and she refused for some reason. I think she was still getting to terms with the idea of being an author. But there you go. I'm still going to read your book, Sarah, so don't you worry. Ed Cox is a great British fantasy author who has had a couple of series out with Gollancz. This is a standalone that I've heard fantastic things about, and I picked up a copy a number of months ago and just haven't got around to it, so I'm going to try and read it next year. Sorry, Ed. And this is The Song of the Sycamore. Not too big of a beast of a book, but I'm looking forward to getting into that. Mike Shackle is a British fantasy author who lives in Canada. I really enjoyed the first book in his series that I read last year. He has basically sort of got a world where there are no more heroes, and the people that rise up and challenge the authorities, people that are trying to come in and take over and cause all sorts of problems, are just ordinary people. They're not warriors, they're not heroes, they're not destined to be great people. They're the only ones that are left, and they rise to the challenge. And I really enjoyed that first book. It's really gritty, really dark. I don't want to say grim dark. It has shades of Joe Abercrombie, and there is humour in there as well. So this is the second book, A Fool's Hope, and the third book in this series has already come out. I'm going to try and pick that up next year. Harlan Ellison was a very famous American sci-fi author who's been writing since the 60s. So it's before my era, but I was aware of him vaguely. I know that he wrote a number of short stories, that he'd worked on the original Star Trek series. I know that The Terminator was based upon one of his ideas. He had to fight Hollywood to get recognition of that, and everyone said, don't do that, you won't get it anywhere. But he was unflinching, unrelenting in his beliefs, very determined guy, very creative, absolutely genius, really well spoken and articulate. So I've picked up Dangerous Visions, which is a collection of stories, award-winning stories from him, and he's part of the kind of the sci-fi masterworks from Gollancz. And I'm really looking forward to reading more of his work. As well as reading fiction, I read non-fiction and biographies and books about writing. Joe Michael Straczynski, the creator of Babylon 5, who also created things like Sense8 with the Wachowskis, and he worked on Jeremiah, and he's written comics for Marvel and DC for decades. He has now written a number of non-fiction books, and one of them is about writing, and this is Becoming a Writer, Staying a Writer. And it's a collection of short stories, anecdotes, thoughts, ideas about the process of being a writer and then staying in the business. I'm a big fan of Nirvana from back in the day, and earlier this year I read The Storyteller, which was Dave Grohl's biography. But I also picked up another one of an actor I greatly admire, and this is Matthew McConaughey, and the book is Green Lights. This is a collection of some of his journals. Apparently he's been writing journals for sort of 20, 30 years, and during the pandemic he had some time to spare, and he always said to his wife, oh, someday I'm going to do something with them and find some kind of eclectic themes in them and work on something. And she said, right, you've got no excuse now, off you go. So he went away to a cabin somewhere for months apparently and worked on this book. And it's stories around his life, the lessons that he's learned. And there again, he's an incredibly articulate, very well spoken, and also very thoughtful guy. So I'm really curious to see what kind of wisdom he's imparting, but also find out more about him when he's not on screen. Those are just the books that are on my shelf that I've got to read. There are others that are not in this room, and I've already gone through probably 25 books. I think there's probably 50 or so on my TBR. I know I'm going to get some more for Christmas and some more for my birthday. I'm going to try and get better next year at dedicating a bit more time to reading, because I do love it and I want to spend more time immersing myself in story. So I'm going to try and get better. It's one of my New Year's resolutions I'm going to do for 2023. Any books that you've seen that you're really interested in? What are your top 3 books that you have on your TBR? That if you had to get rid of everything else, what 3 would you read? Get in touch in the comments and let me know. That's all I'm going to talk about for today, but I'll be back next year with some new videos.